Hello, my dear friends. This is the first part of the shir from March 13th, 2023. I thought I had pressed the button, but about 10 minutes into the shir, I saw that the screen went blank, and obviously I didn't press it the right way or not strong enough. And this is a makeup of that part of the shir, somewhat condensed. This year we were talking about the status of cultured meat. And we have spoken about different aspects for the past 2 weeks. This year, we talked about some of the basic heterim that there are to allow cultured meat and treat it as parav, and to consider it not, even if it's taken from a non-kosher animal, to consider it to be a kosher entity. There's three main heterim. One is that the stem cells that are used as the starter for the whole process are microscopic and they're not nearly naim. You can't see them. The second is that the cells are nifsal me'achila, they're not edible. And the third heter is that they're bottle, not b'shishim, not be'elav, but in tens of thousands of times over. There is bittul. So we started talking about the heter of not nearly naim. In the previous week's year, we saw the Aruch HaShulchan and others that say that there's a basic rule in Torah: the things that you don't see is as if they don't exist. That's why there are bugs in the liquids, bugs in vinegar, bugs in the air, but they're not visible, and therefore they have no impact on halacha, because the Torah was not given to malachim. So how could we deal? Until recently, there was no way to even know that they existed. And certainly the people that kept the Torah throughout the millennium, we were tzaddikim. We can't say that they did chas shalom averis because they consumed bugs. So therefore, the conclusion that the things that you can't see don't count. This is already discussed as far back as 200-300 years ago. The Yavitz has a tshuva, and Shlomo Kugler, we saw that last week. So the consideration with cultured meat is that the stem cell is tiny. It's not tiny. It's microscopic. You can't see his cells, and when you put the cells into some type of serum and it grows, so we don't have, even though we know scientifically that that's a expansion or division of the original cell, which was treif. Let's say if it was a pork cell, or it's fleishix if it came from a cow. Even though we know that that's the case, but you can't see it. So therefore, it should, in halacha, what you can't see doesn't exist. So therefore, it should be the stem cells should play no role. There is, however, a tshuva from Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which everybody quotes, and that is, it's on page 2 of last week's sheet of Mar Mekomas, and that's Rosh Shlomo Zalman was talking about taking a cell and splicing it, a gene, and splicing it into another food item, another fruit. For example, you want an orange to have a red color, so you'll take a tomato cell or the DNA from tomato and splice it into the orange. And the cells from the tomato are not nearly naim, but Shlomo Zalman discusses, this is on the bottom of page 2, he discusses whether it's kalayim. So he says that somebody suggested it's not kalayim because you can't see the cell. So if you can't see it, it's non-existent. So on that, Shlomo Zalman says that's not true, because kemish anoshim metaplim b'chalkikim ha'ela u'mavir also b'mina acher l'sheni. Since people utilize these very small cells and they transfer it from one fruit or vegetable to another, it's considered as if it's nearly naim. I don't understand what Rosh Hashanah means. I don't know what it means. It's choshev nearly naim. I suggested that perhaps he means is that you could see the outcome. It indicates that there's something there. If you could see, the whole idea of naim is you can't prove it if you can't see it, and therefore until recently, where they have special instrumentation, it was not, you weren't able to know that it existed. But in the case of, if you take a cell out of a tomato and put it into an orange, you could see the result almost immediately. and therefore that maybe the result makes it considered to be near. I mean, you can't retroactively. You don't say that the cell is bottle or the cell doesn't. It's not that it's bottle, but it ceases to exist. But that if you could see the outcome, that's indicative that it's there. I compared this once to electronic devices. Why don't we say that if you're talking on a telephone and to somebody that's 5,000 miles away in China, why don't we say, if you do that on Shabbos, it should be mutter because it's not Erev Einayim. Until, if you take somebody from, like the Mark Twain story, the night in King Arthur's court, if you take somebody from a few hundred years ago and magically, miraculously transport them to our times, and you would show them a cell phone, and you say, here, look, see, I'm talking here, and my voice is going to travel across the ocean. They'll think that you're off your rocker, crazy, but that is the case. So why don't you say that it's not nearly Naim, that you should be able to talk on a cell phone on Shabbos? Because if you, without special electronical techniques and knowledge and etc., there's no way to know. You can't look at the phone and see that anything's happening. It looks like nothing's there. It's just you're talking into a piece of metal. So it's not nearly Naim. So the answer is because you could see the outcome. If you see that when you use the phone to call somebody, you could hear the other person's, you could hear your voice and his voice, her voice, that means that the phone is doing something. So that would be considered nearly Naim because of the outcome. You can't see it in its initial stage where it's happening. You can't see anything. You don't see the electrons flowing around, whatever they're doing. But you see the outcome. But the same thing is if you plug in an electronic device and it starts, and then you turn it on. So why don't you say that, well, it's not nearly Naim. There's no way to see how it operates inside. It's all internal in the wires. But the answer is that you can see the outcome. So in any event, whatever Shlomo Zalman means, that's the refutation that they express with respect to this issue of Ner L'Einayim with the stem cells. It's considered Ner L'Einayim the same way Shlomo Zalman considers the cell Ner L'Einayim as far as Kalayim. Rav Moshe has a discussion also about Ner L'Einayim, and Rav Moshe's tshuva I also don't understand too well. Rav Moshe's the top of page 2, he's talking about if somebody stopped breathing, but you could, with electrocardiogram, you could show that the heart is still pumping. Do we say that the person is still halachically considered to be alive? So the person that asked the Shiloh said that, well, it's not nearly Naim. Electrocardiogram is something that they didn't have until recently. You can't consider that nearly Naim. And Ramesh says that, basically what he says is that the Gemara says that you're allowed to poke, the Tosefta I think says, you're allowed to poke a person to see if they're alive, and it's not considered Darkei Hamori there. It's not considered to be something that's considered like Kishuv, because there was an incident where somebody was dead for 3 days, and then they poked him, and they saw that he was still alive. So since, Ramesh says the pshat is that since you see, even though it's very remote, but it's a muta, but once in a million, it works to poke somebody to show that he's alive. So therefore, you're allowed to do it, because you're not doing it to raise the dead. You're doing it to check to see whether the person perhaps is alive. So he says, you see that there's such a mitzvah as somebody who's not breathing, but still he's considered to be alive, because otherwise, how did the person return to life? So Moshe says that if the electrocardiogram shows you that the person has a heartbeat, and we know that people with heartbeats, there's a stronger possibility of their returning to normal state of affairs. So that's not called nearly Naim, because what the electrocardiogram does is it shows you that the person is in a different category where his heart is beating even though he's not breathing. I still don't understand, the same way I didn't understand Rosh Hashanah's tshuva, and that's because of my lack of understanding. I don't understand what Ramesh is saying either. Why don't we say that determination that the person is part of a category of people that have a heartbeat, even though he's not breathing, and therefore there's a certain percentage of such people that could be resuscitated? Why don't we say that that's not nearly Naim? You don't. How do you know that the person has a heartbeat? Only because there's electrocardiogram. So if you discount things you can't see, so it should be like you didn't see that, you don't know that he has a heartbeat. Okay, I think that's approximately where we're up to, the part that got lost, and now you should turn on, or you should play the second tape in this part of the series.